Welcome everyone to this video of my channel, The Mental Traveler. I'm Carolera and today I'm very excited because I'm going to be talking about a series that is very close to my heart, Star Wars Rebels. I shall be reviewing season 1 and 2, and when season 3 is done, I shall be reviewing it as well in another video. I should mention though that this will be a review with spoilers, so if you have not watched the show or all of its seasons, take caution. And one more thing, it's going to deal a lot with Anakin Skywalker / Vader, as well as Ahsoka Tano and Kanan Jarrus. I also want to dedicate this video to my friend the Far Bright Center because she's the one who first introduced me to Star Wars Rebels. So thank you girl for discussing with me everything about Star Wars as well as encouraging me to watch the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels. I shall be quoting her many times in this video. And now, for those who are still watching but have not seen the show, what is Star Wars Rebels? This 3D CGI animated television series first came out in 2014 as a film called Star Wars Rebels, Spark of the Rebellion. The show is created by Lucasfilm and it belongs to Disney, and just as with Clone Wars, one of the main showrunners is Dave Filoni. And this makes me really happy because he was involved with George Lucas since before Lucas left the scene. I wasn't even aware of Star Wars Rebels a few months ago, even though I have been a huge Star Wars fan for years. And I was always, for some reason, delaying watching the Clone Wars, the series that takes place between episodes 2 and 3. And while I had heard about Clone Wars, which I have already watched and reviewed in another video, I had never really heard of Star Wars Rebels. And just as with Clone Wars, I thought that Star Wars Rebels was going to be just another kids show, but I am very glad to admit that I was really wrong. I don't see Star Wars Rebels strictly as a kids show, because even though it is animated, it has some really dark stuff at some points. But I still like how children can watch it and be entertained, even as teenagers and adults see it and can analyze it and end up with this really amazing meta. Star Wars Rebels takes place between episodes 3 and 4, specifically 14 years after the events of Revenge of the Sith and a few years before what we're going to see in A New Hope. As I said previously, before the show there is a film preceding it, which helps to establish who the main characters are. Basically the story deals with this kid called Ezra Bridger, who is Force sensitive, and if he had been born during the Republic era, he would probably have become a Jedi. But he is born during the Empire, and while this government doesn't really approve of Force sensitive kids, Ezra has managed to live under the radar with nobody taking any particular notice about his special abilities. That is until he meets with this gang composed of Kanan Jarrus, Hera Syndulla, Sabine Wren, Seth Aurelius, and the grumpy yet lovable droid Chopper. And as we move along in the show, we get to learn the backstory for each character because Ezra ends up joining them, and soon enough they are an unconventional family. This group travels across the galaxy on board a ship called the Ghost to fight off the Empire because in truth they belong to the rising rebellion. And by working together, these loners find a new meaning to their lives. And hope grows in them because even when it appears that their missions are doomed to fail, it really fulfills them to be working for the greater good. This sort of life leads them into trouble, particularly from the Inquisitors, who are also known as Darth Vader's dogs. And the job of the Inquisitors is to hunt down any remaining Jedi across the Empire. And they go after the crew of the Ghost, not particularly because Ezra is Force sensitive, but because Kanan has decided to train Ezra to become a Jedi. Kanan is one of those characters that I'm going to really be talking about a lot in this video. That's why I'm going to be mentioning his backstory. When Order 66 took place back in episode 3, Kanan was just a Padawan learner, and just as the clones turned against him and his master gave up her life so she could give Kanan a chance to escape. And after this, Kanan spent years on the run, hiding his Jedi background and even changed his name. He isn't really called Kanan Jarrus, his real name is Caleb Dum. So basically he tries to do as Obi-Wan instructed Jedi when Order 66 was taking place, to avoid detection. But then one day Kanan meets up with Hera and she convinces him to help her fight against the Empire. They end up falling in love, and this sort of gives Kanan peace and stability, which was something he was sorely needing but lacking in his previous life. And once Ezra Bridger joins the crew of the Ghost, Kanan begins to use his lightsaber again in public and uses the Force openly and isn't hiding anymore the fact that he was training to become a Jedi before the Empire began. Still, he feels that he isn't really the right person to teach Ezra because he was never knighted as a Jedi. He wasn't old enough when Order 66 took place for that. So he fears he won't be able to do a very good job with Ezra. He is wrong, of course. He is knighted by the Force, which I think was done mostly to give Kanan this assurance and this much needed confirmation that he was equipped to train others in the Force. The Far Bright Center, who I'm going to be referring to as TFBC, and I agree that it can be argued that Kanan is actually a far closer version of the original Jedi than the ones we see in the prequels, since the you can't form attachments rule is disregarded by him. This is a rule that wasn't established when the Jedi Order first came to be, and while I discussed Kanan with TFBC, we agreed that showing how Kanan is sort of a father figure to Ezra and to Sabine Wren, as well as being a protector to the crew of the Ghost, is to prove that Jedi could form attachments and be the better men for it, which was not a belief that the Jedi of the last days of the Republic approved of, and which caused Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader, my favorite character in the Star Wars universe, a lot of conflict. And as TFBC points out, it's compelling that this is all happening to Kanan under Darth Vader's shadow. Vader, the man who suffered from the no attachments rule, who is now an enemy to all Jedi, including Kanan and Ezra. And as a sort of a side note, I love how once Kanan has been blinded by Darth Maul, he doesn't let this stop him from fighting back, and he even fights back using a white mask, one of the temple guards. And on another note, in Star Wars Rebels, we also get to see a lot of the characters that were first introduced in the Clone Wars TV series, particularly in the second season. For example, the clone Captain Rex, who served through the wars with Anakin Skywalker. And I love that Rex is back, not only because I adore his character, but because it gives him this sense that he is now once again where he belongs. He is now part of a family, and he's again serving the remnants of the Republic. And while it is a little bit tragic that he and Kanan do not get along very well at first, I like this because it shows how the remaining Jedi feel mistrust and are bitter towards the clones. And yet Rex is happy to be working alongside a Jedi again, even if Kanan resents him and his kind. We also meet up with Hondo Onaka, a very funny and likable pirate from the Clone Wars. Hera Syndulla and her dad also appeared in that show, so it was nice to have this connection. We also get to see Lando Calrissian, Bail Organa, R2-D2, C-3PO, Princess Leia, and Darth Maul. And I should say that when I first watched the Clone Wars, I wasn't really pleased with them bringing back Darth Maul from the death, but now that I've gotten used to him being back, I guess that his character development is pretty interesting. And I am not fond of him, but I would like to see a duel between him and Vader. I wouldn't like it because I'm sure it would please Sidious, and I hate Sidious, but it would be really fascinating to watch Vader, a Sith Lord, fighting an ex-Sith because of what Maul did to Qui-Gon Jinn. Vader would pretend to be killing of Maul because he betrayed the Sith, but in reality I think he would be fighting him to take revenge for Qui-Gon Jinn. So a Sith Lord taking revenge for a murdered Jedi from long ago is pretty cool. But I really like Star Wars Rebel because we meet up with Darth Vader. And I love that we see him not because we get to see more of my favorite character, but because of many reasons that I shall be mentioning in the review section of this video. We also get to see a very likable and lovable face from the Clone Wars, Ahsoka Tano, Anakin Skywalker's former Padawan apprentice. She's all grown up and a member of the rebellion. And even though she's an irregular character of the show, I am so happy that they chose to bring her back for most of the same reasons that make me happy to see Vader on the series, when they both first sense each other for the first time in years. It shakes them both so much because I concur with TFBC when she says, in my opinion, when Darth Vader telling his master about Ahsoka's reappearance, says to Sidious, the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker, it's almost like he is being very careful with his wording. Getting back to Ahsoka, I agree with TFBC with the following. How incredibly moving that Ahsoka, as a living embodiment of Anakin's goodness, has been one of the key factors in helping get the rebellion going. It is like, this is what Anakin himself would have been doing had he still been fully himself. I rate Star Wars Rebels with a 5 out of 5 stars review, not only because it has some really amazing and interesting storylines and has compelling original characters, but also because of how they've treated Darth Vader. For this, I have to mention the final episode of Season 2, Twilight of the Apprentice. It has captured my attention. It was so intense to watch, but gratifying at the same time. I'm not sure who, unfortunately, but someone wrote some very interesting meta about some bits of this episode. The work is entitled Vader's Mask in Twilight of the Apprentice. I found it on the Far Right Center's Tumblr blog. I'm going to highlight some parts of it here. It starts off with describing how Vader's suit can be viewed as this prison for Anakin Skywalker. It physically changes Vader's former self inside it, and it also represents how he is trapped into this position by Sidious from which he cannot escape. To quote the original text, the suit is symbolic of all the reasons Darth Vader couldn't leave his master even if he had wanted to. He exists in a state of never changing or evolving, unable to move on, full of pain and anger, locked into the mindset of the Jedi betrayed the Republic and they betrayed me. I did what was right. I still do what is right. There's nothing left for me. Anyways, nothing but this. I may just as well stay like this and serve the Empire. This suit is a shell that keeps him from ever changing. When Vader meets up with Ahsoka in this episode that I'm mentioning, he knows that she has recognized him, and he actually offers her mercy, which is not something he's famous for doing. Sure, he is offering mercy on his own terms, meaning that she has to betray her friends, and he may have done this because she was not an official Jedi and thus not his official enemy, but the fact remains that he offered her mercy initially. But then much later, once they have resumed their fight, Ahsoka manages to cut off a part of Vader's mask. And of all the things that he could have done after this, he ends up calling her name twice, as he remains on his knees, and he does this in Anakin's voice. The actor who voiced Anakin in Clone Wars actually came back and reprised his role for this, and he did it in a way that conveys layers of emotions and longing. I may be reading too much into it, but I doubt that I am the only one. And this has such a big impact on both characters. When Ahsoka first suspected that Anakin had turned into Vader, it broke her heart, it destroyed her, but she was still willing to kill Vader in the end if that's what it took to bring down the Empire. But when she sees Anakin behind the mask, and she hears him calling out for her twice,
I won't leave you! Not this time.
she vows she won't leave him again. The way I'm sure she is feeling guilty about doing back when she left the Jedi Order and him.
Then you will die.
Even though we only see for like 5 seconds Anakin responding to this in the way his expression changes and softens, it can be argued that this is the first step that Vader took in the path of atonement. Before this episode, all he wanted to do was to destroy the Jedi. Ezra and Kanan even point out in another episode how cold and menacing he is. And a side note, this really hurts because, as TFBC was kind enough to remind me, when Anakin is first in space as a little kid, he feels really cold. And to think that when he was a grown man, he actually embodied the meaning of coldness. Such a powerful symbolic imagery. And this also helps to stress how much more fearsome he is than his inquisitors. Whenever they fail, Vader is called upon to solve their mess. He's so powerful. And just as another quick side note, I love the backstory for the Grand Inquisitor. How he was once a Jedi and then turned on them in order to survive and ends up hunting them. But then when he is dead, his spirit sort of becomes a Force ghost and guards Jedi temples, and just shows that even though he did horrible things, he can end up redeeming them, just like Vader himself does later on. Getting back to Vader's mask, the author of the text that inspired all of this said, "For the first time we can see a crack in Vader's mindset. It is a seed that will not sprout for several years with all the events of the original trilogy. But when Ahsoka cuts a hole in Vader's life support suit, she cuts a hole in his heart that could not be sealed even with a new mask. The wheels of change were set in motion." And then it can even be argued that the title Twilight of the Apprentice could be a reference to this being the beginning of the end for Sidious' apprentice, in the sense that when something momentous happens, aka discovering he has a son, he will be ready to change. And I just adore how we see this distant and ruthless Sith Lord. Rather than being victorious, he ends up really shaken and vulnerable because of his encounter with Ahsoka. And rather than having them duel to the death, we're left with the amazing image of a broken Vader stumbling away from a Sith temple, even as Ahsoka descends further into it. And it's so interesting to contrast the Vader who first arrived at the Sith temple to the one who left it. And whatever the reason that Vader and Ahsoka Ahsoka didn't finish each other off, or even if he did kill her and the glimpse we see of her is of her spirit or something, I am sure that she is still in a way trying to find out how to destroy the Sith. And it's so beautiful to think of a leader of the rebellion deciding to stay with the Sith Lord because she loves him and wanting to save him rather than destroying him at all costs. And I think that she stayed in the Sith temple because her promise of never leaving Anakin again. And maybe by finding a way to destroy the Sith is a way to keep this promise alive. Once again, to quote TFBC, there is a quote from the Tarkin novel by James Luceno that comes to mind here. One which harkens back to Matthew Stover's novelization of Revenge of the Sith, in its use of the imagery of the dying star as a metaphor for Anakin's downfall. Darth Plagueis had once remarked that the Force can strike back. The death of a star didn't necessarily curtail its light, and indeed, Sidious could see evidence of that sometimes even in Vader, the barest flicker of persistent light. Can't help thinking about how many people love Vader as a villain, or think of him as a villain, when in reality being inside that bad quality suit was awful for him. On another note, it is said that Vader is meant to represent fear in Star Wars Rebels, and as TFBC once commented, he incites fear, but also represents your worst fear coming true. And this is a hero with no fear from the Clone Wars we're talking about. And yet, despite all his military renown, he had so much fear of losing those he loved, and when he does, there is nothing left for him anymore, which allows Vader to become everyone else's worst fear. But anyways, the reasons why I love Star Wars Rebels. I really like how we get to see Jedi from the Republic training new Jedis during the Empire era. In the original trilogies, we don't get to see in so much detail with Obi-Wan and Yoda and Luke. Here we have many episodes of Kanan instructing Ezra in the Jedi arts. Another thing that I like that TFBC kindly enough pointed out to me once was that in the final episode of season 1, we see the rebels fighting officially the Empire for the first time above Mustafar, the very place where Anakin had gone off to in episode 3 to end the war. The planet where Jedi have been taking thereafter for torturing, the place where Anakin lost so much. And then the title is quite fitting, Fire Across the Galaxy. This is a place where Ahsoka and Anakin went to rescue Jedi younglings in the Clone Wars. Maybe not in season 3, but why did showrunners decided to keep Ahsoka's storyline going on? What implications will it have for the future? And how will they tie that with the original trilogy? The first episode of Star Wars Rebels Season 3 premiered on September 24th. Once that season is done, I shall be reviewing it as well. I am so looking forward to learning the aftermath and the effects of the duel with Ahsoka that Vader faces. I want to know what's the deal with Darth Maul and Ezra. I want to see Kanan and Hera kiss, but one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is that in season 3 we're going to be introduced to General Thrawn. And Thrawn is a really well-known character in the Star Wars expanded universe. Timothy Zahn created him decades ago, and I've reviewed many of the books in which Thrawn appears, like Thrawn Trilogy and The Hand of Thrawn duology, and then there's Survivor's Quest that deals with some things that Thrawn did when he was young. Thrawn is such a compelling character, and I'm really looking forward to watching him. I should note, though, that I find it funny how Disney, after it acquired Star Wars, decided that the expanded universe would no longer be canon and would now be considered legends. And yet here they are taking a character from the expanded universe and bringing it into one of their shows. I am not complaining though, because with Thrawn's inclusion, Star Wars Rebels connects the prequels, Clone Wars, the original trilogy, now also the expanded universe. This is all for today's video. Please let me know what you think about everything that I said here. I would love to discuss anything that caught your attention about it. In the description box below you can find links to the Far Right Center blog on Tumblr, as well as links to the series IMDb page and trailers for season 1, season 2, and season 3 of Star Wars Rebels. Once again, a big thank you to my friend the Far Right Center for her insightful knowledge and amazing media, and thank you as well for watching this. I'm Caro Herrera, the Mental Traveler, and I hope you have an amazing day wherever you are. May the Force be with you. Bye!